I got a couple neighbors here. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it. That was just a quick double check for audio, and the session is being recorded. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So the agenda for today is we'll talk a little bit about QB Power Hour for the people that are here for the first time. We'll do a quick introduction about the host, Michelle and I. Michelle's not available today. She's doing other trainings, and so I'm here by myself with guest speaker Jeff Lenning. That's going to be the first portion of the training here. He'll talk about doing Excel magic. Okay, pretty much building custom reports using pivot tables, and you will have a lot of fun with him because he is a true Excel expert. And then after the first half, I'm going to cover some of my own QuickBooks to Excel techniques useful to summarize, and I will cover a couple of announcements and updates. I live by myself. I live and work in Miami, Florida. I have my own classroom in which I teach QuickBooks and some Excel. I'm a CPA and a member on the Intuit Trainer Writer Network, so I do a lot of training for Intuit. Michelle Long is a successful author in the world of Intuit and the world of QuickBooks. She has an incredible LinkedIn group. If you haven't joined it, join it, because there's a lot of support from your peers there. 132,000, I believe, is the number of members now. And she's also a member of the Intuit Trainer Writer Network, and she travels all over the world. She's not available today because she's held up in some of the trainings, but she's usually my partner in crime in QB Power Hour. CPE process, we're actually 100% caught up. So we sent all the CPEs we've had up to the last webinar. To get your CPE certificate, you must attend the webinar live. You must be logged in for at least 50 minutes. And you must enter the CPE password. I get a lot of emails from people saying, I tried to enter the password, it didn't work. Unfortunately, the only record we have to verify that you attended here, it's our logs. And our logs tell us what time you logged in, what time you logged out, and whether or not you put the password. So we need you to put the password in the webinar application for us to be able to have proof for the certificates. And they're usually about 2 weeks behind, 3 weeks behind in some cases. We're going to go ahead and pass the baton to Jeff Lenning, who's going to cover the first half. I know he's got a much better slide introduction for himself, so I'm going to go ahead and make him presenter.
All right, thanks, Hector. Let me go ahead and throw this on, and let me share this. And you should now be seeing my green slide, is that right?
Yes, we're seeing it, no problem.
All right, man, well, thank you very much. And I know I have a limited time, so I want to talk about some ways to summarize QuickBooks data using an Excel pivot table. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to blow through this introduction. My name is Jeff, and it's a pleasure to be here talking with you for, I don't know, about a half hour about my very favorite program, Microsoft Excel. All right, now, here's what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at exporting data from QuickBooks, and then we're going to figure out how to prepare it if needed for use with a pivot table feature of Excel. A pivot table feature of Excel creates a pivot table report, and there are certain data requirements to use that feature. One of them is that the data has got to be flat data. And so we're going to talk about a quick way to flatten data. When we export things from QuickBooks, sometimes it's not in a flat format. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then once our data is ready to go, then we can summarize it using the power of an Excel pivot table. And all of these topics are directly from the third volume of my Excel University series, and there's more about that resource later. For now, though, if you want to work along, I'd invite you to download the files, and they are found on my Excel University website, /QB Power Hour. Let me go ahead and navigate there so that you can make sure. This is
I posted the link on the chat, so if you want to click on it, it'll take you directly there, and you can download the Excel spreadsheet and the presentation.
Cool. Hey, thanks, man. And yeah, and so there's two parts. Part one we did already. If you haven't seen that, feel free to grab a copy of the recording. Today, though, we're doing part two, summarizing QuickBooks data with a pivot table. So you want to make sure that you use this part two download. And there's two parts. One is the Excel file that I'll be using. The other is the actual handout. It's a PDF file that I prepared for you. nice guy, but it's got all the stuff that we covered today, so feel free to grab both of these resources. All right, let me go back to here, and let's first talk about this dialog box. I don't know if you're familiar with this dialog box, but when you're in QuickBooks and you take a report or transaction listing or an item list and you want to send it to Excel, you get this dialog box, and it's changed a little bit over the versions of QuickBooks, but this is a pretty recent version of this dialog box. And most often, our instinct is to create a new worksheet and click the export button. And that's fine, but when we do that, it does not force QuickBooks to send it out in a flat format. And what it does do is oftentimes create like a hierarchy. And the way that Intuit decided to set that export button up is that, like, if you do a balance sheet, it uses new columns to create the indents, and sometimes it throws in like little skinny columns, and that looks nice, but it's not an ideal format for working with Excel. Excel loves flat data where there's values in all the rows, there's values in all the columns, there's no blank cells in there, there's no subtotals, there's no blank skinny columns. That's the way Excel is designed to operate with data. And when we just use that first QuickBooks export button to create a new worksheet, we're asking QuickBooks to do an export in an Excel format, but it simulates its report hierarchy by indenting things. And when it does that, it's really difficult to use that data with Excel. And we have to use really sophisticated lookup functions, and we have to flatten it down. And so the point is, as opposed to using that very first radio button, that first choice, if you look at the very last one, it says create a comma-separated values file, a CSV file. When you make that selection, it sends out the same exact report labels and the same values, but it does so in a flat format so that all the report labels are in one column and all of the amount values are in the same column. And that makes working with the data in Excel way easier. It reduces the amount of cleanup we have to do in Excel. So point number one is, more often than not, when we're doing an export from QuickBooks to Excel, we want to use this create a CSV file option. All right, and now let me flip over to Excel to demonstrate a couple of different things. All right, here I've opened up the Excel file, QBPT, and we're going to do 2 exercises together. All right, the first exercise we're going to do, exercise 1, is we're going to get practice flattening the data in case it is not flat, because that is an absolute requirement to work with pivot tables. And on the E1 data sheet, I've simulated what data looks like that is not flat. See, this data is not flat because if I resort the data, I lose track of what's where. And the relative position of the data is how I know which name and which account the transactions are for. For example, I know that the transaction on 14 is for Bayshore Water because it says Bayshore Water. The only way I know that 15 and 16 are for Bayshore Water is because where they are in the sequence. And that means I can't filter this or sort it. It also means if I do that, now I'm out of luck because I don't know what goes with what. So flat data is described by a record set where all information about a record is stored within that row, right? And that means I have to repeat these labels all the way down. So our first exercise is going to be demonstrating how to flatten this out and then create a pivot table report on it. And then we're going to get to exercise 2, where we're going to take this export. This is a transaction listing, and I just exported it from QuickBooks. And you're going to recognize some of these names because this is just the sample data. And then we're going to create a pivot table report based on this. And this is totally unmodified. I did not change this. I just dumped it out, and now we're going to create a pivot table report on it. So the first step is making sure our data is in the right format. When I go to exercise 1, I see that this is not in a flat format, and I need to flatten it. And the good news is there is a really easy sequence of steps I don't know, it's like 3 or 4 steps, and it'll flatten this data for us. And step 1 is to select the range that you want to flatten. In other words, repeat the labels or fill those labels down. So I'm going to select my label range. And that is step 1, select my label range. All right. Step 2 is we now need to write a formula into the empty cells that retrieves the value from the cell above. So let me say that one more time. We want to write a formula in the blank cells that pulls its value from the cell above. Can we do that? Yeah, we can do that. Here's how we do it. First of all, we need to change our selection. Right now our selection includes all of the label cells and the empty cells. We need to update this and tell Excel we actually want a subset of this range, and we only want to select the blank or empty cells. And here's how we do that. We simply go to the Home ribbon tab under Find and Select. We scroll down to where it says Go to Special. Okay, so Home, Find and Select, Go to Special. When we select Go to Special, Excel throws up a dialog box that's called Go to Special. And if you haven't played with this dialog, I'd encourage you to spend a few minutes in here. There's a lot of fun stuff to check out. The one we're interested in now, though, is this radio button here called Blanks. Blanks. And what we're telling Excel is, instead of this entire selection, update the selection to only include the blank cells. So we click OK, and now what we can see is that all the cells in that original range that had values are not selected. And all of the cells in that original range that are empty are selected. Okay, and that's what we can see. And we also see that in this entire selection, one cell is the active cell. It's this white one. So we have many cells selected. We have one active cell. And now, into the blank cells, we need to write a formula that retrieves the value from the cell above. The way that we write the formula is this. We type in an equal sign, and then we use our keyboard, and we use the up arrow. And then we just wait here. We don't rush and hit enter. Okay? We type equals, we type up arrow, and we do not hit enter. Because if we hit enter, what we're telling Excel is that we want to enter that formula into the active cell. And that is not what we wanted. Remember, into the blank cells, we wanted to write the formula. So instead of hitting enter, we're going to hit Control Enter. Control Enter tells Excel something different. Enter tells Excel to enter the formula into the active cell. Control Enter tells Excel to enter the formula into the, you got it, selected cells, not just the active cell. Okay? So we hit Control Enter, and yeah, it worked. And as we can see, just like that, Excel has flattened this data for us, and it's filled all these values down. And what we have at this point now is a mix of some value cells and some formula cells, right? Here's a value cell, and here's a formula cell. Here's a formula cell, formula. Okay, and so what we want to do is we just want to replace those formulas with their values. The way that we do that is a simple copy. So we do is select the entire range, and then we do a copy. And then instead of doing a paste, we do what's called a paste values. And when we paste values, we're telling Excel to take what's on that clipboard and just paste the values, not the formulas, not the cell formatting, just the values. And so we do values, and just like that, now we flattened it down. And so now all those formulas are gone, and we're left with a nice flat data set. Now this is a data range that Excel is designed to work with. Okay, but I'm going to try to do every exercise twice. So let me undo. And let's try this again. The first step, do you remember it? Yep, we select the entire range that we want to flatten, all these label cells. That's step 1. Step 2, we update our selection to include blank cells only. Remember how to do that? Yes, it's through that Go to Special dialog. Go to Special, select blanks, click OK. Now we only have the empty cells. Then we write a formula Remember, there was 2 steps to this. We just use our keyboard, equals, up arrow, and before we hit enter, okay, because hitting enter will enter the formula into the active cell. We want to hit control enter because that will enter the formula into the selected cells. Control enter. Got it. And then we reselect the entire range. We do a standard copy, and instead of doing a standard paste, we do paste values, and that will replace all of those formulas with their values. Now that this is flat, game over. We can do all kinds of fun things in Excel. We can do pivot tables, filtering, sorting, subtotals, sum ifs, game over. What we're going to do in this case is we're going to create a simple pivot table. The way that we do that is we select any cell within the range, and we head to Insert Pivot Table. When we do that, Excel is asking us to confirm the source range, which is good, and then where do we want to put the reports? We want to put the reports, and we could select New Worksheet, that's fine, but I already have a worksheet set up. So I'm going to say Existing Worksheet. I'm going to navigate to that worksheet, and I'm going to select a cell. Now listen, I'm going to navigate to that worksheet, and I am going to select a cell. If you just navigate to that worksheet and hit OK, you're going to get an error message. You have to navigate to the worksheet and click a cell, and the cell that you select represents the upper left corner of the pivot table report. So we click OK, and now we see that our workbook has changed a little bit. We have this little graphic, and that's just a temporary placeholder. We have a new ribbon tab called Pivot Table Tools, Analyze and Design, and that'll pop up as needed. So if we click away from the pivot table report, it'll hide. When we activate the pivot table report, it'll show. And these are all the different settings and options, and I encourage you to explore some of the stuff. We're going to cover some of them today, but not all of them. This is a great big feature, and I need more than 30 minutes to cover it. So we're going to cover some of these, but not all. And that's the Pivot Table Tool Design Ribbon tab. And then on the far right, we have a brand new Fields panel. And again, that's another one that shows and hides as needed. So if it's gone because you've selected a different cell, you can bring it back just by clicking the pivot table, and Excel will bring that list up again. Now, if we look at this Fields panel, we see that there are 4 things: name, account, date, and amount, and these correlate to the data columns. Name, account, date, and amount. So data columns are the same as pivot table fields. Okay? And the way that we build the pivot table report is by telling Excel the report structure. The way that we define the report structure is by inserting these fields into one of 4 areas within the report. Right? So we want to create this by name. We want to summarize it by name. Let's look at our data. We want to summarize it by name. So we want to get the sum of all these Bayshore waters. We want to get the sum of all these CalGas. Okay? So we want to summarize it by name. That means the name field belongs in this rows area. So the way that I insert the name field into the rows area is I just check the checkbox. And when I do that, I can confirm Excel has placed that name field into the rows area, and it's started to build my little mini report. And as you can see, I have 1 row for each name, okay, because it's building it by name. It's summarizing it by name. And then the value that I want to see added up is this amount column, this amount field, and that goes into the values area. So I can click and drag, that's fine, or I could just check the checkbox. Let me check the checkbox, and I can confirm Excel places that into the values area, and it's going to sum the amount column. And now I have the report by name and then the total amount. Okay, let me do that one more time. I click on the range, I go to Insert Pivot Table, I browse to an existing worksheet, and I click a cell. I define the report structure by inserting these fields into one of these 4 layout areas. And the 4 layout areas are rows, columns, values, and filters. I want to see it by name, so name belongs in the row area. I want to see it by item, item belongs by customer, customer belongs in the rows area. By vendor, vendor belongs in the rows. When you hear that keyword by, it's a very strong indicator that that field belongs in the rows area. I want to see it by name. I'm going to insert the name field into the rows area. I can do that by checking the checkbox, or this time let's click and drag. Click and drag and release. And we got it. And now for the amount column. I could check the checkbox, but instead I'm going to click and drag and release. And now we are viewing the data by name, summarizing the amount. But Jeff, what if I want to see it by name and within each name see the account? Yeah, we could do that. We want to see it by name by account. Pivot tables support multiple row areas, multiple row fields. So we can click and drag account down into the rows area and release. And now we see that the pivot table is updated and it's displaying the values by name and within each name by their account. But Jeff, I just want to see it by account. Okay, let's take the name field out. We can do that by unchecking its checkbox. And now we've easily converted that to account. But Jeff, I want to see it by account by name. Okay, let's leave the account in there and add the name. So as you can see, I can click and drag and insert these into any location, and I will be fine. Okay. All right. So that, excuse me, that's exercise 1. So far, so good. And what we did was we flattened this data, and then we built a pivot table report from it. Let's move to exercise 2, where we get to use some filters and some other fun things. This exercise due data tab includes an export that I just exported and pasted it in, and it has type, date, num, name, memo, account, class. If I keep scrolling right, it's got a bunch of columns, and I want to summarize it with a pivot table. Now, do you remember we said that a pivot table data source has got to be flat, and so the next step that I do of selecting the range is very important. Okay, and so what I do not want to do is start with A1 and drag down. And the reason that's going to give me a problem is because now I've selected columns A and B, which don't have any data. Okay, so when I'm working with QuickBooks exports, or any exports, the data source range is really important that I select it properly. Otherwise, I'm going to get some errors. It's going to be frustrating. So instead of starting with A and moving over, I'm just going to start with C1, and I'm going to start that moving over. Okay, and then I'm going to go all the way over to column M. But it's kind of a hassle to drag this down all the way. And the other problem with that is what happens if next period I want to update the report and I paste in some new transactions and there's maybe 1,000 rows instead of 100. I want to make sure my pivot table has access to as many rows as there are every period, so that this is my reporting template. I paste in some new updated transactions and refresh the pivot table report, and it works. That means instead of using a range reference like C1 through whatever it is, K100, I'm going to use column-only references. Starting with C, I'm just going to select the entire column, and I'm going to drag it all the way over to the end. Now, if I scroll down, I can see that I've actually told Excel that I want the entire column. If I scroll all the way down, keep scrolling down, I see that all of those values are in there. And that's perfect, because next period when I paste in new transactions, maybe there's 1,000. That's fine, because my pivot table is going to include all of the rows in these columns, no matter however many rows are exported. Okay, if you're going to do this technique, it's very important to realize that row 1 has to have my report headers. That's another rule of working with pivot tables, is each column has got to have a column header. It means I can't have a blank row in here because now there's no column header. Okay, so I have to make sure that my data starts on row 1. Then I can select all of these columns. Okay, so with that said, and my selection is done the right way, now the game's over. Now I can just insert a pivot table. Excel asks me where to insert it. I'm going to go for an existing worksheet, exercise 2, click a cell that represents the upper left corner, and click OK. Now we just build the report like we did before, and we just insert these fields into one of these areas. I want to view it by account, so I click and drag account to insert it into the rows area. So far so good. Now I want to see the amount, so I click and drag amount into the values area, and uh-oh, what's going on here? I see that Excel is counting the number of rows, and it's not summing them up. The reason is because not every cell in my data range contained a number. Not every cell contained a number. Look down here. There's a bunch of cells that do not contain numbers. And so if all of the cells do not contain numbers, Excel is going to assume it's some kind of a text field and that you want to count it. But it's not a text field. It's a number field. We want to add it. No problem. It's super easy to fix this. All we have to do is right-click, select Summarize Values By, and then select Sum. And when we do that, Excel is going to change the math from count to sum. By the way, while we're in here, you can summarize values by lots of things. If you want to find the max cost of an item, if you want to summarize values by min, that will let you find the minimum. Sales price, you know, by item, whatever, if you want to try to find the average. So there's lots of fun math choices so you can pick and choose. Anyways, we want to do sum. And now we're so far so good. We have it by account, and we have all this sum. But if you notice, our data has lots of different kinds of transactions. Okay? Let me scroll to the left so we can see, and let me zoom in. We have checks, credit memos, bills, invoices. We have all kinds of different types. So in our pivot table report, we don't want all of those. We just want a subset. So what we do is we just insert that field type into the filters area. We click and drag and release, and now we have a new type filter where we can choose, pick and choose which transaction types we want to include in our report. And what we want to do is we only want to see the paychecks. So we select paycheck and click OK, and now the pivot table report is only including those rows where the type is equal to paycheck. Oh, what? We just want to summarize the bills? Great. Select bill, and now we're just looking at the bills or the credits, and on we go. So we just pick and choose using this filter. We want paychecks. But we don't want all this stuff. We don't want any of these balance sheet accounts. We only want to see these expense accounts. So we really only want to see those accounts where the account label starts with 627. 627. Okay, can we do that and just filter for 627? Yeah, we can do that. And here's how. In addition to report filters like this one here that we created, we also have row label filters. So we can use this pull down, and we can say label filters, and we could pick and choose. Like, I don't know, if we wanted to be easy about this, we could easily unselect these, scroll down, and just pick the 627s, and then click OK. And that would certainly be fine, but I want to show you kind of a funner way to do it. A funner way to do it is to use this label filters and say, I only want to show those that begin with, and there's lots of fun choices for you to explore, begins with 627. And OK. 62750, it's going to be included because we filtered for all 627, as opposed to individually picking and choosing which ones are going to go. Okay, and so that is how creating a report, a pivot table report based on this QuickBooks export. Let me go ahead and undo these, and we'll do this one more time. I'm just going to delete this pivot table and start again. Remember, selecting the data is important. We want to select column references, so any new rows are included. We have to make sure that the data is flat. We have to make sure that the row 1 includes the labels. Once we've got that, we insert pivot table, existing worksheets, select arrange, click OK. And then we insert it by account. We want to see the amount. We want to see type in the filters area. And we only want to see paychecks. Let's grab that. And we want to apply another filter, which is I only want to see those labels that begin with 627. And click OK. And then we want to change the math to sum. All right, that, my friends, is pivot tables based on QuickBooks data. Let me go ahead and.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate it, and we know that that you did have to go, so it is in the halfway point. So I'll let you wrap things up.
All right, thanks. Some additional resources. Stay connected with me on the Excel University blog. If you go to the Excel University website, click on blog. I do some Excel posts here about once a week. You can add your email address here. It's free. If you add your email address, then you'll be updated every time I do a new post. Also, there's an article that I did called Pivot Table Month Groups, and so that might be of interest to you. So on the blog, there is a Pivot Table Month Groups article. You can click on that, and that'll bring up a recent CalCPA article that I did that talks about how do we build a pivot table that actually does month groups automatically. So feel free to check that out. If you want to see any of the additional articles, it's exceluniversity.com/articles, and this will be a list of all the Excel-related articles that I've done, so feel free to check those out. And then the Excel training, and I know, Hector, you'll talk about this, but I have a great discount for you guys. It's awesome online training, and that teaches really how to use Excel in an interactive way and streamline your process, and the voucher code's listed. So. Anyways, Hector, I'll turn it back to you, man, and thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. I know you have to go now. That was an excellent presentation, by the way. I took his course about 3 years ago, and I'm taking the update for 2013 now. There's a lot of neat little things that are coming up with 2013, and in a couple of months, 2016 is coming out. So hopefully when he updates that, I'll be very excited to learn all the 2016 stuff. And the nice thing about Jeff is his course, if he updates it within the subscription time, you will get all those updates as well. So that's a nice thing about taking it now, taking it later, that sort of thing. Excel 2016 is out for preview. So if you go to that link, if you just Google Excel 2016 preview or Microsoft Office 2016 preview, you can download it. It's a free installation. It lasts for about 2 months. And I believe it's the fall of this year where Office 2016 is coming out. And I actually have it installed on my computer, so when I do some of the demos, you may be seeing it. And so far it looks the same. I haven't really figured out what's new about it. But obviously, you know, being a nerdy techie guy like I am, I want to have the latest version. The other piece I want to show you a piece of software called QB2 Excel that really makes it easy. The exporting of the data from QuickBooks to Excel, it makes it really easy. And then if I have time, I'll cover other data exporting tips. Okay, so the premise is, and Jeff already covered, is that with pivot tables, and I'm going to make this font a little bit bigger to make it a little bit easier to read. So with pivot tables, we can build reports with QuickBooks data that look like this that I couldn't do otherwise with QuickBooks, right? QuickBooks cannot build a report like this. And you can export the data manually, which Jeff covered a little bit, or you can use a special free tool called QB2 Excel to export it. So the first thing I'll do is I'll go through the export exercise real quick. So usually the best report to start with for exporting data, in my opinion, is under the Reports menu, and then under Accountant and Taxes, and then it's called Transaction List by Date. In my opinion, this should be the report you start with for most of your Excel exports in which you're going to do pivot table or filtering analysis. The reason for that, and the main reason for that, is because this report has no totals in the bottom. Okay, so all the way in the bottom, there's no totals, so it doesn't require you to delete that line. Because remember, Jeff was talking about the data being flat, so that includes having some garbage line at the end with a total. So what I like about transaction list by date is that it doesn't give you that total. That's the first thing I like about that report. Now, when to export the data, one of the things you want to do is get rid of all these headers, right? Because we need the data to be flat, and we need the columns to be, the headers to be the very first row. So to get rid of the headers, we go to Customize Report up here, and we're going to go ahead and go to Header and Footer, and we'll go ahead and get rid of all these headers here. We don't need any of this stuff. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get rid of all these things here, and we don't need the page number, we don't need footer line, we don't need any of this stuff. So we get rid of all that stuff there, and basically automatically you see that that goes away. That's sort of your first step here as well. The other first step here under Customize Columns is this left margin here is okay. You can get rid of it. All it's going to do is going to require you to skip the first column but because of that weird date range that's there that I really cannot get rid of, I like the left margin, and you're going to see why when it gets exported. Under dates, I can here select all. That way, if I'm, with pivots, I can always filter dates. So I prefer to always just export everything. Let me see. Under filters, this is just an open transaction. See, under detail level, it says summary only. So that means that I'm going to get, some of them are going to say split, like this one down here. So I want to switch it from summary only to all except summary. And what that will do is it will actually show me all the splits. That way I don't get anything that has the word split in it. And basically what you're seeing in here, it's every single transaction into this report. And basically I will use my pivot table to create whatever filters I want. So that's an important piece about it. I want to get rid of that. Let me just double check that because I have some comments saying that was a little bit fast. We go to customize report, we go to filters, and the detail level needs to be all except summary. Okay, that way we don't get the summary information, we get all the detail information. Then once the report is customized, let's say for example, I want to see items as well because that would be useful for the report filtering. I'm going to go ahead and, I'm in QuickBooks 2015 where I can search them. And I'm going to go ahead and include the item as well. And then I'll hit OK here. And then I'm also going to include the amount column because right now I only see debit and credit. And unfortunately, I need these debits and credits to be summarized sometimes. So I'm also going to include the amount column in there and then hit OK. And now this should work. So I'm going to go ahead and memorize this report, and I'll call it all transaction detail for Excel, or whatever I want to call it. The reason I want to memorize it is so I don't have to do this whole customization later on. Then the next step is to go here where it says Excel and create a new worksheet. And typically helps, exactly as Jeff was mentioning, to go straight to comma-separated values, because I would just simplify the export a little bit. But you can try with the cleaning that I've done. We can go straight to just Excel. So we're going to hit export. So technically, I just really don't need to go to CSV because some of the header cleaning that I've done, it's useful enough. Okay, and because there's a lot of data, it will typically take a couple of minutes or so, right? Because I chose not to create any filters here. Now, although this says 1% done, and it sounds like it's going to take like 5 minutes or so, I am going to be a little bit patient and wait about a minute or so for that to export. For now, let me see, or you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be patient about it. I'm going to limit the date range. That way, I don't run into that situation. I'm going to limit it maybe to a month. But what I like to do is, before doing that, because I already kind of started the process there, let me see if I get control back of this information. Let me go ahead and close Excel here, and let me limit this information to a month. That way I'm not, we're not waiting forever to see this. So, so I'm going to go ahead and go to Excel, create new worksheet, and now it should be a lot faster, and hit export. And again, removing the headers, adding the columns, making it with all detail was necessary. And while that does that, I'll take advantage and go over to QBO real quick because people also had questions about how to get the information from QuickBooks Online into Excel and how is it different. And unfortunately, it is significantly different. So I'm going to type here QBO test drive. So I just go to a random sample file to extract some information. And that's typically the best really way to play with QuickBooks Online, right? Just go straight to the test drive there. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a sample file and export. And it is significantly different, and unfortunately, it's not as good. I know that Intuit has been making strong strides into promoting QBO, and we have too, and QB Power Hour. But unfortunately, for exporting data, QBO is not as comprehensive as QuickBooks Desktop. So unfortunately, you will not get as much flexibility. And I'll show you as I do this. So, and there will be a similar report. So I'll click on Report here, and then I'm going to go ahead and find the same report, which is Transaction List by Date. So I'm going to search it here real quick. It's called Transaction List by Date. Same premise. Whoops, that was the desktop data. So I'll go Transaction List by Date. I'll click in there. And I'll get the same exact type of report. Now, there's one caveat, one issue with QuickBooks Online in comparison to QuickBooks Desktop. with QuickBooks Online, and you'll see if there are splits, so if there's more than one target account, there's no filter in QuickBooks Online where I can open up that split. So unfortunately, I'm going to have some reporting limitations if transactions have splits in it. That's one of the things I really dislike about it. Under the Customize button up here, I can do a similar thing with the headers. So I can get rid of the headers the same way I did with QuickBooks Desktop. So I can go to headers and footers, and I can get rid of all this stuff. And good common practice to do for exporting data. And then I'll click Export to Excel. And so we'll basically have two spreadsheets going. We will have the one from QuickBooks Desktop and the one from QuickBooks Online, and it'll be good because we can actually compare both. Okay, so we can see how how Desktop sends the information out and how QuickBooks Online sends the information out. So this one that you're seeing here is the one from QuickBooks Online. Notice that we got rid of the headers, so that way we don't have to deal with deleting the headers. And if I scroll all the way down, I don't have any totals, which is good. Okay, so that's a good clean export from QuickBooks Online. I'm going to switch to the one that we exported from Desktop. See, it looks a little bit different. It inserts this little column here that we don't need. We can simply delete that. And then there's 3 blank columns here that we also don't need. We can also delete those. And then we finally got a flat file. Now, some of the issues that we have with QuickBooks Desktop is by default it inserts this spaces between rows. That we need to get rid of. So I'm going to go ahead and close that and show you what needs to be done differently in QuickBooks Desktop during the export process. So when I go to Excel, create new worksheet, and by the way, if I would have chosen comma-separated values, I would not have to worry about those spaces. But because I didn't do it that way, the way to get rid of it is we go to Advanced up here, and oops, I have to make sure that Excel is selected here. I'll go to Advanced up here, and I make sure that I uncheck space between columns, and that will go ahead and do that. With space between columns, I would have issues otherwise doing a pivot table. Okay, so I know when Jeff started, he went straight to pivot tables. He didn't talk about some of the nuances of exporting data, which is the part that I wanted to cover personally. Okay, so in summary, for QuickBooks Online, it works the exact same way. However, the most important challenge is that I personally have not figured out a way to open up this split, right? So there's no option here under Customize where I can tell it, all except for summaries, simple, sort of the same situation that we do with Desktop. So unfortunately, that's a piece of emptiness that I have to leave with you because I have not figured out any way in here how to do that. So I find that a challenge to be able to export raw data from QuickBooks Online. So that's as much QuickBooks Online I wanted to do, and I'll just focus my attention here on QuickBooks Desktop. So back to the data we exported from QuickBooks Desktop, and basically at this point we would follow Jeff's suggestions to just insert the pivot table, and then follow all of Jeff's suggestions at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, and I do see that there's a resolution issue. So I'm going to unshare the screen real quick and share it again. Okay, there we go. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is this utility called QB2 Excel. Again, with the purpose of doing a pivot table after the fact, right? So I'm not going to spend any more time with pivot table. Jeff spent enough time. And the nice thing about the tool I want to show you is that I don't need to build reports like this, right? I don't need to be customizing reports in QuickBooks. All I do is I run the application. It's called QB2 Excel. By the way, this application is free. You literally just Google QB2 Excel and you'll get to their website. It's 100% free, no trial, and it works beautifully. It's an awesome application, by the way. So basically the way this application works is you have to have QuickBooks open, for sure. You have to have it open because it needs to know where it's going to get data from, because you can have 100 QuickBooks files, right? So in here, we're going to click on All Tables, and we're going to choose from which subset of data in QuickBooks we're going to pull a report. So, for example, if I wanted to pull sales information like sales receipt line items, okay, that means at the item level, right? And then I'm also going to go to invoice line items. That way I'm gonna pick up every single transaction that is a sales transaction in nature, that is a posting sales transaction in nature, and I should probably do credit memo line items too. That would be the logical thing in case we have returns. So by doing this, I extract basically all three of those data tables. That means I'm going to get, in a nutshell, all of my item level sales transactions. So I'm going to click on convert. And notice that I don't have to do anything fancy in QuickBooks. I don't have to choose filters. This application, QB2 Excel, is actually in charge of doing all this. So it's actually really, really cool. And all this stuff is pretty much happening behind the scenes. And this is QuickBooks 2016, by the way. It looks just like 2013. I haven't figured out what's better about it, but just testing it out. So that's really what I like about this tool. And basically, while this data finishes loading, I just wanted to show you what that website looked like. This is that link that you see here. I'm going to go ahead and post it on the chat. So I'm going to copy and paste it here on the chat. That way everybody has the link here. And if you want to check out that link, again, the tools are 100% free, and I strongly recommend you look into it. All right. So when it's done doing the export, you're gonna see a tab for each transaction type, right? So one for my invoice line items, one for my sales receipts line items, and one for my credit memo line items. And this is already clean. It doesn't require any removal of headers or removing of junk information. It actually brings in information that is not available in QuickBooks itself, which is database information. So these codes here that really don't mean much to us, but they could be useful in other ways if we're doing other types of analysis. And it also brings in every single column. This is super cool. This is super neat because we can do stuff like, for example, you see here, shipping state. So now I can do reports, sales by state or something like that. So I'll just do a quick example of that. We'll do a pivot table here, and there's one called shipping state. So I'm going to search it here. There's shipping state. So I'm going to put shipping state here, and then basically all the states that I'm shipping to, and then I'm going to go to, in this case, amount, and move amount over here. And basically I can see, and just like Jeff said, we'll change the summarization to sum. I can actually see my sales by ship to address, something that is just not available in QuickBooks, period. The data is there, but the reporting capabilities are not there. So this is the true magic of getting data outside of QuickBooks and into pivot tables. The true magic is to be able to do something like this. All right, so that finishes that part of the presentation. Last thing I'll talk about is upcoming events. So in about 3 to 4 weeks, so very, very soon, about 3 weeks, there's going to be a huge event in New Orleans, hence the keyword question, scaling new heights. If you've never been there before, strongly look into that, especially if you're looking for in-depth QuickBooks training. This is like QuickBooks Disneyland. I mean, it's all QuickBooks for 3-4 days straight. It is really, really worth your while. If you don't make it to Scaling New Heights, or if you can make it to both, even better, Intuit has its own event called QuickBooks Connect, which is in San Jose, California. I'll be there. I think I'm going to be there for sure as well. So I hope to see you there. And Sleater conference is 2 weeks later. Sleater is a little bit different because it's not 100% about QuickBooks. It's about accounting and the cloud mostly. So you will see competitors of QuickBooks also in there as well. But if you have time this summer to go to New Orleans, strongly suggest it. It's going to be a blast. And if you go, come say hi and share some information that you wanted to some of your thoughts about QB Power Hour. So there was another report, and this is just kind of retracting some of my original statement. There's another report different than transaction list by date, which is called transaction with split. Now this one works because it comes with the splits. The problem with this one is it requires a lot more cleaning in Excel. So because we get so many of these blanks, now so it's a lot less, I would say it's a lot less, how do I explain it? It's a lot less fast, right? It's a lot slower to work this way. So it's a lot less intuitive to work with this report because I do get the splits in this case with this transaction. But in order for me to be able to do anything functional in terms of, specifically in terms of pivot table, is when I export this to Excel, I'm going to have to go back to Jeff's technique, and I have to fill in all the blanks. So this could work, but I have to come in here and do Jeff's technique. Remember Jeff's technique, right? Where we select the column, and then we put here equals the column above, and then we hit Control Enter, and it autofills. So it requires a lot more cleanup, and we do have the tools, and you learned the tools with Jeff. But this is my one caveat about working with this report that has the split. So it could work, but it requires a lot of cleanup, and if it takes you 20 minutes to put a report together, it is probably unlikely that you're gonna use this every day in your job function. So that's the one thing I'm worried about, working with a report that requires so much cleaning up. All right, so the last couple of announcements here is next QB Power Hour is going to be on June 11th. We don't have a specific topic yet. We're still mulling over exactly what we're going to cover. And if you don't go to Scaling New Heights, and even if you go, 2 weeks later we'll have what we learned at Scaling New Heights. So anything new and exciting that I learned about QuickBooks and the world of QuickBooks, and what Michelle learns as well, we're going to go ahead and share that on the June 25th episode. All right, so it's top of the hour. Thank you very much for being here with us. Don't forget to provide feedback. In a couple of days, you will get an email with the recording. Join the Facebook group to continue the discussion. There was a lot of questions that I just couldn't answer because I'm bombarded with questions. I'm by myself. So go ahead and join the group and ask some questions there. And that's it. Thank you very much, and you guys have a wonderful day.